The Valdori Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. They had conquered 400 worlds and destroyed civilizations that had existed for millions of years before them. They were the masters of everything they could see, and they believed that nothing in the universe could challenge their power. High Sovereign Ketharan sat upon his throne on the capital world of Valdor Prime. His scales were the color of polished obsidian, and his eyes burned with the cold fire of absolute authority. He had ruled for 300 years, longer than any sovereign before him. Under his command, the Dominion had grown stronger than ever. New worlds fell to his fleets every decade. New species bowed before his image and called him God. On this day, like many days before it, his advisors brought him reports of newly discovered worlds. Most were barren rocks or gas giants with no value. Some held primitive life forms that might one day evolve into useful slaves. But one report caught his attention for a brief moment. "There is a system at the edge of our expansion zone," said Fleet Commander Vorath, projecting a holographic image of a small yellow star. "We have detected radio signals emanating from the third planet. Primitive electromagnetic transmissions. They appear to be a young species that has just begun to explore their own solar system." Ketharan looked at the small blue dot that rotated slowly in the hologram. It was a water world, covered in oceans and green land masses. The data showed it was home to a species called humans. They had existed for only a few 100,000 years. They had developed technology for only a few centuries. They had reached their own moon just decades ago. "They are insects," said Ketharan with a dismissive wave of his clawed hand. "What threat could they possibly pose?" "None, my sovereign," Vorath replied. "Their entire military capability could not scratch the paint on one of our cruisers. They have no interstellar travel, no energy shields, no weapons that could harm us. Our analysts estimate that full conquest and subjugation would take no more than 3 rotations." "Then add them to the schedule," Ketharan said, already losing interest. "We will collect them when it is convenient." Vorath bowed deeply and left the throne room. The sovereign returned to more important matters, and the small blue world called Earth was forgotten for several months. But the universe has a way of bringing forgotten things back to attention. The first strange report came from a Nithari trading vessel that had been observing the Sol system for several decades. The Nithari were merchants and information brokers. They traveled everywhere and sold what they learned to whoever would pay. They had been watching Earth since humans first split the atom, curious about this young and violent species. The report said that the Nithari were leaving, all of them, every ship, every station, every observer they had placed in the outer reaches of the human solar system. They were packing up and fleeing as fast as their engines could carry them. When asked why, the Nithari captain sent back a single message. "We have seen enough. We will not be here when you arrive. We strongly advise you to reconsider your plans." The Dominion intelligence officers laughed at this warning. The Nithari were cowards by nature. They had no military and survived only by being useful to more powerful species. Of course, they would flee at the first sign of conflict. It meant nothing. The second warning came from the crystalline mines of Theta 7. This was far more unusual. The crystalline mines were ancient beings, older than the Dominion itself. They existed as vast networks of living crystal that spread across dead moons and asteroids. They almost never communicated with other species. They watched, and they remembered, but they did not speak. Until now. A message arrived at Valdor Prime through channels that should not have existed. It was addressed to High Sovereign Ketharan personally. The message contained only 7 words. "Do not wake the sleeping thing." Ketharan read the message 3 times. He summoned his advisors and demanded an explanation. No one could provide one. The crystalline mines had never sent a warning before. In 12,000 years of Dominion history, they had never shown any interest in the affairs of flesh-and-blood species. "What does it mean?" Ketharin demanded. "What sleeping thing? Are they talking about the humans?" "It is impossible to know, my sovereign," said his chief advisor. "The crystalline minds speak in riddles when they speak at all. Perhaps they are referring to some ancient danger on Earth that we are not aware of. Perhaps they are simply mad. Crystal beings do not think as we do. Should we investigate further before proceeding?" The advisor shook his head. "Our scouts have surveyed the Sol system thoroughly. There is nothing there but a primitive species on a single world. They have a few small colonies on their moon and some robotic probes on nearby planets. They are not a threat. The crystalline minds may be ancient, but they are not all-knowing. I recommend we proceed as planned." Ketharin considered this advice for a long moment. He had not ruled for 300 years by ignoring warnings, but he had also not built the greatest empire in galactic history by showing fear at shadows. "Proceed," he said finally, "but send the 4th Expeditionary Fleet instead of a standard subjugation force. If there is some unknown danger in that system, I want enough firepower to handle it." The 4th Expeditionary Fleet was one of the largest military formations in the Dominion. It contained 2,000 warships, including 12 planet killers that could crack a world's crust with a single bombardment. It was commanded by High Admiral Vorath himself, the same officer who had first brought the report of Earth to the Sovereign's attention. Vorath was pleased with this assignment. Conquering a primitive world would add to his glory without any real risk. The fleet gathered at a staging point 3 light years from Sul and prepared for the short jump that would bring them to their target. While the fleet assembled, a third warning arrived. This one came from the Morkethi, being so ancient and powerful that even the Dominion treated them with respect. The Morkethi had existed before the first stars formed. They had watched galaxies rise and fall. They rarely interfered with younger species, preferring to observe from dimensions that most beings could not perceive. A Morkethi ambassador materialized on the bridge of Vorath's flagship without warning or permission. She appeared as a tall, slender figure wrapped in robes made of folded space. Her face was smooth and featureless, except for 2 eyes that contained the light of dead stars. "You must not do this," she said, her voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere at once. Vorath rose from his command chair, furious at the intrusion. "How dare you board my vessel without authorization? The Morkethi have no authority over Dominion military operations." "We have authority over nothing," the ambassador replied calmly. "We only observe. But we have watched Earth for a very long time, and we have seen things that your sensors cannot detect. That world is not what you think it is. It is a primitive planet inhabited by primitive creatures," Vorath said. "Our scouts have confirmed this. Your scouts saw what the humans wanted them to see." The ambassador moved closer, and Vorath felt a chill run through his scales despite himself. "You look at Earth and see a cradle, a nursery for a young species taking its first steps into the universe. That is not what Earth is. Then what is it?" The ambassador's empty face somehow conveyed an expression of deep sorrow. "It is a mouth, and you are walking into it." Vorath stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, though the sound was hollow. "You speak in riddles like the crystalline minds. If you have concrete intelligence about a threat, share it. Otherwise, remove yourself from my bridge. I cannot share what I know. There are rules that even we must follow. I can only warn you, as others have warned you. The humans are not prey. They are not even predators in the way you understand the word. They are something else entirely. Something that has been waiting for a very long time." "Waiting for what?" "For you. For anyone foolish enough to come with hostile intent." The ambassador began to fade, her form becoming transparent. "We have watched 1,000 species rise and fall. We have seen empires greater than yours burn to ash, but we have never seen anything quite like humanity. Turn back, High Admiral. This is not a conquest. It is a trap." And then she was gone, leaving only a faint shimmer in the air where she had stood. Vorath stood in silence for several moments. His officers watched him nervously, waiting for orders. The warnings had shaken them, he could see. 3 different species, including the ancient and unknowable Morkethi, had all told them the same thing. Turn back. Do not go to Earth. But Vorath had not become High Admiral by showing fear. He had not risen to command the 4th Fleet by turning away from challenges, and he could not imagine returning to Valdor Prime and telling the High Sovereign that he had abandoned the mission because of vague warnings and mystical nonsense. "Continue preparations," he ordered. "We jump to Sol in 6 hours." "Sir," his second-in-command said hesitantly, "perhaps we should report these warnings to the Sovereign and request guidance. The Sovereign gave us our orders. Conquer Earth, subjugate the humans, add another world to the Dominion. That is what we will do." Vorath sat back down in his command chair and stared at the holographic display showing the Sol system. "These warnings mean nothing. The Nithari are cowards. The crystalline minds are insane, and the Morkethi love to speak in riddles to make themselves seem wise. None of them have given us any concrete information about an actual threat. But, sir, all 3 of them said the same thing. Turn back. And none of them said why. If there was a real danger, they would tell us what it was. They are trying to frighten us away so they can claim Earth for themselves. The Nithari probably want to set up exclusive trading rights. The Morkethi probably want to study the humans without interference. It is politics, nothing more." His officers did not look convinced, but they obeyed. That was all that mattered. In 6 hours, the 4th Expeditionary Fleet formed up into jump formation and activated their faster-than-light drives. 2,000 warships disappeared from normal space in a flash of exotic radiation. They emerged at the edge of the Sol system, just beyond the orbit of the farthest planet. Before them lay their target, a small yellow star surrounded by 8 planets, countless asteroids, and one pale blue dot that held 7 billion humans who did not yet know their fate. Vorath looked at the tactical display and smiled. The humans had detected their arrival, of course. Primitive as they were, they had sensors that could pick up the energy signature of a fleet translation. He expected panic. He expected desperate transmissions begging for mercy. He expected exactly what he had seen from 100 other primitive species facing the might of the Dominion. What he got was silence. The humans did not respond at all for nearly an hour. No transmissions, no signals, no apparent activity. Their satellites continued their orbits. Their ships continued their patrols. It was as if 2,000 warships had not just appeared in their solar system. "Perhaps they do not understand what they are seeing," suggested one of his officers. "They may not recognize a military fleet." "Or perhaps they are frozen with terror," said another, unable to respond. Vorath nodded slowly, but something felt wrong. He could not explain it. The system looked exactly as the scouts had reported. Earth was there, blue and green and white, rotating peacefully around its sun. The moon was there, with its small human colonies visible as clusters of lights on the dark side. Mars was there, with a few human outposts clinging to its rusty surface. Everything was normal. Everything was as expected. And yet the warnings echoed in his mind. The Nithari fleeing, the crystalline minds breaking their eternal silence, the Morkethi ambassador materializing on his bridge to deliver her cryptic message. It is a mouth, and you are walking into it. Vorath shook off his unease. He was a High Admiral of the Valdori Dominion. He commanded enough firepower to destroy this entire system. There was nothing here that could threaten him. "Begin the approach," he ordered. "Standard subjugation formation. We will be in orbit around Earth within 2 days." The fleet began to move. 2,000 ships advancing toward the small blue world like a swarm of metallic locusts descending on a field of grain. Behind them, the stars shone cold and indifferent. And somewhere in the darkness between planets, something that had been sleeping for a very long time began to wake up. The humans had been watching the Dominion for far longer than the Dominion had been watching them. They had known this day would come. They had prepared for it with a patience that no other species in the galaxy could match. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all that remained was to close the jaws. The 4th Expeditionary Fleet moved through the outer reaches of the Sol system with the confidence of absolute power. 2,000 warships in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the dark metal of Valdori engineering, their weapons charged and ready for a fight that everyone believed would never come. High Admiral Vorath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical display as his fleet passed the orbit of Neptune. The ice giant hung in space to their left, a pale blue sphere surrounded by thin rings of frozen debris. Human probes had visited this world decades ago, sending back images and data that the Dominion scouts had easily intercepted. "Status report," Vorath commanded. "All ships in formation, sir. No enemy contacts detected. Human communications remain unusual." Unusual how? The communications officer shifted nervously. "They are not behaving as expected, sir. We have intercepted thousands of transmissions from Earth, but they are contradictory." Some governments appear to be calling for immediate surrender. Others are demanding resistance. There are reports of riots in major cities, mass panic, military forces mobilizing without clear orders. Vorath nodded slowly. This was more like what he had expected. A primitive species facing extinction would naturally fall into chaos. Their governments would collapse. Their people would turn on each other. By the time the fleet reached Earth, there might not be anyone left to resist. "They are frightened," he said. "Good. Fear makes conquest easier." But as the hours passed, and the fleet moved deeper into the system, Vorath began to notice things that did not fit the pattern of a panicking civilization. The first thing he noticed was the satellites. Earth had thousands of them, orbiting at various altitudes, performing various functions: communications satellites, weather satellites, spy satellites, scientific satellites. The Dominion had mapped all of them during their initial surveys. Now many of them had moved. Not randomly, as if they had been abandoned or damaged. They had repositioned themselves into new orbits with precise, coordinated movements. When Vorath asked his analysts what the new configuration meant, they could not explain it. "It could be a defensive measure," suggested one analyst. "They may be trying to create some kind of sensor network to track our approach." "Or it could be meaningless," said another. "They may simply be moving assets around in panic." Vorath accepted this explanation, but it did not satisfy him. The second thing he noticed was the moon. Earth's single natural satellite had several small human colonies on its surface, mostly on the side that faced away from Earth. These colonies had been active and visible during the initial surveys, their lights and heat signatures easy to detect. Now they had gone dark. Every colony, every outpost, every installation on the lunar surface had shut down completely. No lights, no heat signatures, no communications. It was as if everyone had simply vanished. "Perhaps they evacuated," his second-in-command suggested. "Fled back to Earth in anticipation of our attack." "Perhaps," Vorath agreed. "But evacuation would leave traces. Ships moving between the moon and Earth. Changes in the colony's infrastructure, something to indicate that people had packed up and left in a hurry. There was nothing. The colonies had not been evacuated. They had simply stopped." The third thing he noticed was the most disturbing. Deep within Earth's oceans, far beneath the surface where no light could reach, thermal sensors detected strange patterns. Heat signatures that flickered on and off in rhythms that matched no natural phenomenon. Shapes that appeared briefly on sonar scans before vanishing. Movement in the deepest trenches where humans supposedly could not survive. "What is down there?" Vorath demanded. "Unknown, sir. Human submarines, perhaps, or underwater habitats we did not detect in our initial surveys." "How could we miss underwater habitats? Our sensors can penetrate their entire planet." The analyst had no answer. Vorath stared at the display showing Earth's oceans, watching the strange patterns pulse and fade in the darkness. For the first time since entering the system, he felt genuinely uneasy. Not afraid, exactly, but uncertain in a way he had not felt in decades. The Morkethi ambassador's words came back to him. "Your scouts saw what the humans wanted them to see." He pushed the thought away. It was ridiculous. Humans were primitives. They had barely mastered spaceflight. The idea that they could somehow hide things from Dominion sensors was absurd. The fleet crossed the orbit of Uranus, then Saturn, with its magnificent rings stretching across millions of kilometers, then Jupiter, the gas giant so large it could swallow Earth 1,000 times over. Human probes orbited all of these worlds, primitive machines taking photographs and measurements that the Dominion considered laughably crude. As they passed Jupiter, the first human response finally came. It was not what anyone expected. A transmission arrived from Earth, broadcast on all frequencies simultaneously. It was not a military communication or a government declaration. It was a simple video message from a woman who identified herself as the Secretary General of something called the United Nations. She was middle-aged with gray hair and tired eyes. She sat behind a desk in an office that looked hastily arranged, as if she had been called away from something important to record this message. When she spoke, her voice trembled with what sounded like genuine fear. "To the commanders of the approaching fleet," she said, "we know why you are here. We know that you represent an empire that has conquered hundreds of worlds. We know that you believe we cannot resist you." She paused, looking down at her hands. They were shaking. "We are not warriors. We are not an empire. We are a young species that has only begun to understand the universe around us. We have seen your ships on our telescopes. We have calculated your weapons' power. We know that we cannot defeat you in open battle." Vorath smiled at this. Finally, some honesty. "Therefore," the Secretary General continued, "the governments of Earth wish to negotiate a peaceful surrender. We will accept whatever terms you offer. We will provide workers for your mines, soldiers for your armies, whatever you require. We ask only that you spare as many of our people as possible." She looked up at the camera, and for a moment Vorath thought he saw something strange in her eyes, something that did not match the fear in her voice. "Please respond to this message so we can begin negotiations. We are at your mercy." The transmission ended. Vorath's officers erupted in satisfied murmurs. This was exactly what they had hoped for. A complete and total surrender before they even reached their target. The humans would capitulate, the conquest would be bloodless, and the Fourth Fleet would return home in triumph. But Vorath did not join in the celebration. He replayed the message, watching the Secretary General's face carefully. Her words spoke of fear and surrender. Her body language showed trembling hands and downcast eyes. Everything about the message said that humanity was defeated and terrified. Everything except that one moment when she looked up at the camera. In that instant, just before she asked them to respond, Vorath saw something that did not belong. It was not fear. It was anticipation. "Sir," his communications officer asked, "should we respond to their surrender offer?" Vorath hesitated. Every instinct told him that something was wrong. The warnings, the strange behavior, the things that did not add up. And now this surrender that seemed too perfect, too convenient. But what could he do? Return to Valdor Prime and tell the High Sovereign that he had abandoned the mission because of a look in a human's eye. He would be laughed out of the fleet. His career would be over. Yes, he said finally. Tell them we accept their surrender. We will enter orbit around Earth in 30 hours. They are to prepare for our arrival and offer no resistance. The message was sent. The fleet continued its advance. That night, as Vorath tried to sleep in his quarters, another warning arrived. This one came from the HFY, a species that the Dominion had conquered 3,000 years ago. They were now servants and administrators, handling the bureaucratic details that the Valdori considered beneath them. One of their senior officials had somehow obtained a secure channel to the flagship. "Hi, Admiral," the HFY said, his insectoid face filling the screen. "I risk execution by contacting you like this. But I have seen the reports from Sol, and I must speak." "You risk more than execution," Vorath growled. "What do you want?" "To warn you. To beg you to turn back before it is too late." Vorath felt his patience snap. "Not another warning. Every species in the galaxy seems determined to tell me that humans are dangerous, but no one will tell me why. If you have information, share it. Otherwise, end this communication and accept whatever punishment your superiors decide on." The HFY's compound eyes glittered with something that looked like pity. "You do not understand. I cannot tell you what humans are because I do not know myself. No one knows. That is the point. Explain. 5,000 years ago, before the Dominion conquered my people, we encountered humanity. They had not yet developed space travel. They were still fighting among themselves with primitive weapons. But even then, there were stories. Legends passed down from species who had visited Earth millions of years earlier." "What kind of legends?" "Warnings." The HFY leaned closer to the camera. "Earth is not a normal world, High Admiral. It is a death world. The gravity is crushing. The atmosphere is corrosive. The weather is violent beyond belief. And the life that evolved there," he shuddered visibly. "Nothing that survives on Earth is weak. Everything there is a predator, from the smallest microbe to the largest animal, including the humans." "They are primitive," Vorath insisted. "Our technology is thousands of years beyond theirs." "Yes, your technology is superior. Your ships are stronger. Your weapons are more powerful. But you are walking into their territory, into a system they have had decades to prepare, into a trap they have been building since they first realized they were not alone in the universe." "How do you know this? How can you possibly know what humans have been doing?" The HFY's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because we tried to warn them. 50 years ago, when we first intercepted their radio signals, we sent a secret message. We told them about the Dominion. We told them what was coming. We thought we were being merciful, giving them time to prepare for the inevitable." Vorath felt a chill run down his spine. "You warned them? You told them we were coming?" "Yes, and they listened. They stopped their public conflicts. They pretended to remain divided while secretly uniting. They poured their resources into hidden projects that our observers could not detect. They built things in places we did not think to look. And they waited. Waited for what? For you." The HFY's image began to flicker as the connection destabilized. "They have been waiting for you, High Admiral. Everything you have seen, the chaos, the fear, the surrender, it is all a performance, a lure to draw you deeper into their system. By the time you realize the truth, it will be too late. The door will already be closed." The connection cut off, leaving Vorath staring at a blank screen. He sat in the darkness of his quarters for a long time, thinking about what he had heard. The HFY had risked death to warn him. The Morkethi had broken their eternal neutrality. The crystalline minds had spoken for the first time in millennia. The Nithari had fled rather than witness what was coming. Something was very wrong. But in the morning, when his officers asked for orders, Vorath made the only choice he could make. The fleet was committed. The surrender was accepted. To turn back now would be an admission of cowardice that would follow him for the rest of his life. "Continue the approach," he ordered. "We will reach Earth on schedule." The fleet passed the asteroid belt, that ring of rocky debris between Mars and Jupiter, where humans had just begun to establish mining operations. The asteroids drifted silently in the void, thousands of tumbling rocks of all sizes. Vorath did not notice that many of them had stopped tumbling. He did not notice that their trajectories had changed slightly, almost imperceptibly, as the fleet passed by. He did not notice that some of the asteroids were not asteroids at all. The trap was almost ready. The prey was almost in position. And deep within the Earth's oceans, in chambers that no human had ever officially acknowledged, lights began to turn on in places that had been dark for a very long time. The waiting was almost over. The Fourth Expeditionary Fleet crossed the orbit of Mars and entered the inner solar system. Earth was visible now on the main display, a bright blue point of light that grew larger with each passing hour. In 12 more hours, they would achieve orbit. In 13, the conquest would begin. High Admiral Vorath stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion and watched the countdown timer with a mixture of relief and lingering unease. Despite all the warnings, nothing had happened. The humans had sent several more surrender messages, each more desperate than the last. Their governments were falling apart on live broadcast. Their people were fleeing cities in panic. Everything was proceeding exactly as expected. Perhaps the warnings had been nothing more than superstition after all. "Sir," the communications officer said suddenly, "we have lost contact with the rear guard." Vorath turned. "Lost contact? What do you mean?" "The ships at the back of our formation. They stopped responding to signals approximately 4 minutes ago. We assumed it was a technical malfunction, but now we cannot reach any of the ships in the trailing squadrons." "How many ships?" 47, sir. And the number is growing." Vorath felt the first true stirring of alarm. Technical malfunctions happened, but not to 47 ships at once. Not without any warning or distress signal. "Show me." The tactical display shifted to show the rear of the fleet. Where 47 ships should have been, there was only empty space, no debris, no energy signatures, no indication that anything had ever been there at all. They just vanished? "Yes, sir. One moment they were there, the next they were gone. Our sensors detected nothing. No weapons fire, no explosions, no anomalous readings of any kind." Vorath stared at the display. Ships did not simply vanish. They were destroyed and left wreckage. They were captured and could be tracked. They fled and could be pursued. They did not just disappear without a trace. "All stop," he ordered. "Bring the fleet to a halt immediately." The command went out, and 2,000 ships began the process of slowing their advance. But before they could complete the maneuver, something else happened. The stars began to disappear. It started at the edges of their field of view. Stars that had been visible since they entered the system winked out one by one, as if someone was drawing a curtain across the sky behind them. The darkness spread quickly, swallowing entire constellations in seconds. "What is happening?" Vorath demanded. "Are our sensors malfunctioning?" "No, sir. The sensors are working perfectly. The stars are not being blocked by anything physical. They are simply gone. It is as if space itself is being removed from existence behind us." Vorath watched the darkness spread. In less than a minute, the entire sky behind the fleet had turned black. Not the black of empty space, dotted with distant points of light. True black. Absolute black. a void that seemed to swallow light itself. "Try to contact Valdor Prime." The communications officer worked frantically at his console. "No response, sir. Long-range communications are completely dead, not jammed. There is nothing there to connect to. It is as if the rest of the galaxy no longer exists." The bridge fell silent. Every officer stared at the black wall that now surrounded them on three sides. Only the direction of Earth remained open, the blue planet hanging in space like a lantern in an endless cave. "It is a trap," Vorath whispered. The words of the Morkethi ambassador echoed in his mind. "It is a mouth, and you are walking into it." He had not listened. He had been warned by 4 different species, and he had not listened. And now it was too late. "Full reverse," he shouted. "All ships, full reverse. We need to get out of this system immediately." The fleet began to turn, massive warships wheeling about to face the direction they had come from. But as they completed their rotation, their sensors revealed what was waiting for them. The empty space between Mars and Jupiter was no longer empty. What had appeared to be asteroids were unfolding. Thousands of objects that had looked like tumbling rocks were now revealed to be something else entirely. Ships, if they could be called that. Massive structures of dark metal and strange geometry that hurt the eyes to look at directly. They rose from the asteroid belt like ancient leviathans waking from millennia of sleep. And they were not alone. From the moons of Jupiter, more shapes emerged. From Saturn's rings, which the fleet had passed just hours ago without incident, vast platforms powered up and began to move. From Neptune and Uranus and every dead moon and frozen rock in the outer system, weapon systems came online that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. "How is this possible?" someone whispered. "We surveyed this entire system. We scanned every object. How did we miss all of this?" Vorath understood now, with horrible clarity, what the Kethvari had tried to tell him. The humans had known they were being watched. They had known exactly what Dominion sensors could and could not detect, and they had built their defenses accordingly. The chaos on Earth had been theater. The surrender messages had been bait. Every indication that humanity was a weak and divided species had been a carefully crafted lie, designed to draw the fleet deeper and deeper into the trap. "Navigation," Vorath said, his voice steady despite the fear that gripped him. "Find us a path out of this system. Any direction. Any route." The navigation officer worked at his console, his hands trembling. After several long moments, he looked up with despair in his eyes. "There is no path, sir. Whatever those things are, they have surrounded us completely. The only way forward is toward Earth. The only way back is through the blockade. Then we go through the blockade. All ships, weapons free. We fight our way out." The fleet opened fire. Thousands of weapons discharged simultaneously, filling space with beams of destructive energy that could crack planets. The firepower was overwhelming, enough to destroy any fleet in the known galaxy. The human defenses absorbed it like water absorbing drops of rain. The dark structures from the asteroid belt did not dodge or evade. They simply continued their approach as the Dominion's weapons struck them and dissipated against surfaces that seemed to drink in energy rather than reflect it. Shots that should have vaporized smaller vessels had no visible effect at all. "Impossible," the weapons officer said. "Our sensors show direct hits. Maximum yield. But there is no damage. No damage at all." "What are those things made of?" "Unknown. The material does not match anything in our database. It is not any form of matter our science has ever encountered." Before Vorath could respond, the human defenses began to return fire. They did not use weapons like anything the Dominion had seen before. No beams of energy, no missiles, no projectiles. Instead, space itself seemed to twist and fold around the targeted ships. Vessels that had served the Dominion for centuries were simply crushed by invisible forces, compressed into balls of twisted metal and dying crew in seconds. Other ships began to drift, their power completely drained, their crews alive but helpless as their vessels went dark. Still others vanished without any apparent cause, pulled into folds of space that opened beneath them like mouths. "All ships retreat toward Earth," Vorath ordered. "We cannot fight this. Our only hope is to reach the planet and use their population as leverage." It was a desperate gamble, but it was the only option left. The fleet turned and raced toward Earth, abandoning formation as every captain focused solely on reaching the blue planet before the trap closed completely. But as they approached, they discovered that Earth's defenses were even more terrifying than those hidden in the outer system. From the ocean depths, those strange thermal signatures that Vorath had noticed earlier, massive platforms rose into the atmosphere. They broke through the water in explosions of steam and spray, climbing toward space on drives that should not have been able to function in a gravity well. Each platform bristled with weapons that made the asteroid belt defenses look primitive. From the dark side of the moon, installations that had seemed abandoned came alive with blinding light. The lunar colonies had not been evacuated. They had been converted into weapons platforms, their populations hidden in underground bunkers while their surface structures transformed into something terrible. And from Earth's orbit, satellites repositioned themselves into patterns that Vorath finally understood. They were not creating a sensor network. They were creating a targeting grid. The first orbital strike hit his flagship directly. The Eternal Dominion, greatest warship in the Valdori fleet, shuddered as something punched through shields that could withstand the heat of a star. Alarms screamed throughout the ship as atmosphere vented from a dozen breaches. "Damage report!" Vorath shouted over the chaos. "We have lost engines 4 through 7. Hull breaches on decks 12 through 28. Weapon systems at 40% and falling." "How did they penetrate our shields?" "They did not penetrate, sir. They went through. The weapon they used, it does not interact with shields at all. It passes through them as if they do not exist." Vorath stared at the display showing the carnage around him. Ships were dying everywhere, great warships that had conquered worlds reduced to debris in moments. The proud 4th Expeditionary Fleet, 2,000 strong, was being dismantled piece by a species they had come to conquer. And through it all, the humans said nothing. No demands for surrender, no threats, no communication of any kind. They simply killed, methodically and efficiently, as if they were performing a task they had rehearsed many times before. A transmission finally came through, not from Earth's governments or military, but from one of the rising platforms. A human face appeared on the screen, a woman in a uniform that Vorath did not recognize, her expression calm and cold. "This is Admiral Chen of the United Earth Defense Force," she said. "Your fleet has been disabled. Your retreat has been blocked. Your communications have been severed. You have approximately 30 minutes before our weapons finish what they have started." Vorath leaned forward. "We demand to negotiate. We have the right to surrender under the conventions of war. You do not have rights. You are invaders who came to enslave our people. You received multiple warnings from multiple species, and you ignored them all. You have no one to blame but yourselves for what is happening." "Please," Vorath said, the word feeling foreign in his mouth. He had never begged for anything in his life. "At least allow us to send a message home. Let our people know what happened here." Admiral Chen was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was marginally softer. "One ship will be allowed to leave. You will choose which ship and who will crew it. The rest of your fleet will be destroyed. This is not negotiable." "Why? If you have the power to destroy us all, why allow even one ship to escape?" The Admiral's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. "Because we want your empire to know. We want every species in the galaxy to know. Earth is not a world to be conquered. It is a boundary to be respected. The ship you send home will carry that message." She paused, and for just a moment, Vorath saw something behind her mask of military professionalism. Not cruelty, not satisfaction, just a deep and terrible weariness. "You were the first fleet to come here, but you will not be the last. There will be others. And when they come, we will be waiting, just as we waited for you. Now choose your ship, Admiral. The clock is ticking." The transmission ended, and Vorath was left alone with the sound of his dying fleet and the knowledge that everything he thought he knew about the universe had been wrong. The humans were not primitive. They had never been primitive, and the galaxy would never be the same again. For 6 days, the 4th Expeditionary Fleet fought to survive in the Sol system. They never made it past Jupiter. High Admiral Vorath watched from the crippled bridge of the Eternal Dominion as his fleet was slowly, methodically taken apart. The humans did not fight like any enemy he had ever faced. They did not engage in glorious battle. They did not seek honor in combat. They fought like a force of nature, patient, relentless, and utterly without mercy. On the first day, the fleet lost 300 ships trying to break through the blockade near the asteroid belt. The strange, dark structures from the belt had formed a wall across their retreat path, and every attempt to punch through resulted in more casualties. The Dominion weapons still had no effect on those impossible vessels. Energy beams dissipated against their hulls. Missiles detonated harmlessly in the void between them. Ramming attempts failed when ships were simply swallowed by folds in space that opened like hungry mouths. By the second day, Vorath had abandoned the idea of escape. He ordered his surviving ships to form a defensive sphere, protecting the most damaged vessels in the center, while the outer ring held off the human attacks. It was a standard Dominion tactic, one that had worked against a dozen other species. It did not work against humans. They came in swarms, not their great platforms or their impossible dark ships, but smaller craft, fighters and drones that emerged from hidden hangars throughout the system. Thousands of them, tens of thousands, each one piloted by either a human or an artificial mind that thought and reacted faster than any Dominion crew could match. The swarms did not attack directly at first. They circled the Dominion fleet like predators, sizing up wounded prey. They probed defenses, testing responses, learning patterns. When they finally struck, they knew exactly where to hit. Vorath watched a cruiser's engine section explode as a wave of drones found the one weak point in its shielding. He watched a carrier's flight deck collapse inward as fighters coordinated an attack so precise that not a single shot was wasted. He watched his ships die, one by one, and he began to understand the true horror of what humanity had become. They had prepared for this, not for years, for decades, perhaps longer. Every weapon, every tactic, every piece of technology they deployed had been designed specifically to counter Dominion capabilities. They knew how Valdori shields worked. They knew how Valdori weapons aimed. They knew every strength and every weakness of every ship class in the fleet. "How do they know so much about us?" Vorath asked aloud, not expecting an answer. His tactical officer, one of the few who had survived the initial engagement, looked up from his console with hollow eyes. "They have been watching us, sir, for a very long time. Every ship we sent to survey their system, every probe, every signal we transmitted, they intercepted all of it. They learned everything about us while showing us only what they wanted us to see. That is not possible. Our encryption is unbreakable. Not to them, apparently. Their computing technology is different. It does not follow the principles we understand. They think in ways we cannot predict." On the third day, the humans stopped attacking. For 12 hours, nothing happened. The swarms withdrew to a safe distance. The dark ships held position. The platforms orbiting Earth went silent. The only movement was the slow tumbling of debris from destroyed Dominion vessels. Vorath used the respite to assess what remained of his fleet. Out of 2,000 ships, fewer than 600 were still functional. Hundreds more drifted dead in space, their crews alive, but trapped in powerless hulls. The rest were simply gone, reduced to atoms by weapons that defied understanding. He was contemplating surrender when the next phase began. A single ship emerged from Earth's atmosphere. It was human in design, but unlike anything the Dominion had seen before. Sleek and organic-looking, as if it had been grown rather than built. It approached the Dominion fleet slowly, making no hostile moves, broadcasting a signal that requested communication. Vorath accepted the hail. He had nothing left to lose. The face that appeared on his screen was human, but only barely. The woman had the general shape of the species, but her eyes glowed with soft blue light, and lines of circuitry traced patterns beneath her skin. When she spoke, her voice had an artificial quality that suggested she was not entirely organic. "I am Interface 7 of the Earth Collective," she said. "I have been sent to explain." "Explain what?" "Why you are destroying us." "No. To explain what we are so that you will understand why this was necessary." Vorath laughed bitterly. "You think I care about explanations? You are slaughtering my people. Nothing you say can justify that." Interface 7's expression did not change. "We do not seek to justify. We seek to be understood. Understanding will prevent future misunderstandings." "Then explain. Tell me how a primitive species from a backwater planet developed technology that our empire has never seen." "We did not develop it. We remembered it." "What does that mean?" Interface 7 was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made Vorath feel very small. "Humanity is not a young species, Admiral. We are an old one, very, very old. Older than the Valdori Dominion, older than the Morkethi, older than the crystalline minds of Theta 7, though they come close to our age." "That is impossible. Our records show that humans evolved on Earth only a few 100,000 years ago. Your records show what we wanted them to show." "The truth is more complicated." Interface 7's eyes pulsed brighter. "Millions of years ago, humanity reached the stars. We built an empire that spanned galaxies. We created technologies that could reshape reality itself. We were gods, Admiral. True gods, in every sense that matters." Vorath shook his head. "If this were true, there would be evidence. Ruins, artifacts, something." "There is evidence everywhere. You simply do not recognize it. The Morkethi, they were our servants once. The crystalline minds, we created them as a form of living memory. Even the Valdori carry traces of our genetic engineering in their cells, though so degraded now that your scientists cannot identify it." "Why should I believe any of this?" "Because it explains everything you have seen. Our technology is not more advanced than yours, Admiral." "It is older. Much, much older. We did not need to invent new weapons to defeat you. We simply woke up the weapons we had buried before your species learned to use fire." Vorath thought about the dark ships from the asteroid belt, their impossible materials and their impossible defenses. He thought about the platforms rising from Earth's oceans, ancient and terrible. He thought about the way space itself had twisted at human command. "If humanity was so powerful," he said slowly, "why are you still on Earth? Why did you not rule the galaxy? Why did you hide and pretend to be primitive?" Interface 7's expression shifted, and for the first time, Vorath saw something that looked like genuine emotion. Sadness, perhaps, or regret. "Because we chose to forget." "Forget?" "Our empire fell, Admiral. Not to any external enemy. There was no enemy that could challenge us. We fell because of ourselves. Our power grew too great. Our ambitions became too terrible. We did things that haunt us still, though we have erased the specific memories. We made ourselves into monsters, and when we finally realized what we had become, we chose to start over. You deliberately abandoned your technology, your knowledge. We buried it, deep within our planet and throughout our solar system. We rewrote our own minds, removing the memories of what we had been. We became primitive again, truly primitive, and we lived simple lives for thousands of years. We fought with sticks and stones. We built civilizations and watched them fall. We were born, we died, and we forgot. Then how do you remember now? We left triggers, safeguards. If certain conditions were met, the old knowledge would begin to resurface. The primary trigger was contact with hostile extraterrestrial life. Interface 7's eyes dimmed slightly. When we detected your empire's expansion 300 years ago, the awakening began. Slowly at first. Dreams and intuitions that led our scientists in certain directions. Discoveries that seemed lucky, but were actually guided by memories buried in our collective unconscious. The Kethavari said they warned you about us 50 years ago. Yes, that warning accelerated our awakening considerably. We are grateful to them, in a way. They gave us time to prepare. Interface 7 paused. We did not want this, Admiral. We chose to forget for a reason. The power we once had, it corrupted us. It turned us into something we did not want to be. When your fleet entered our system, we hoped you would turn back. We hoped the warnings would be enough. And now? Now we must do what we were designed to do. Protect Earth. Protect humanity. Prevent any outside force from threatening our existence. This is the purpose we gave ourselves when we chose to forget. This is why the safeguards exist. Vorath looked at the display showing his dying fleet. 600 ships, most of them damaged, all of them trapped. 24 hours ago, he had commanded the most powerful military force in the sector. Now he was a prisoner, waiting for execution. What happens next? He asked. Your fleet will be destroyed, all except one ship, as Admiral Chen promised. That ship will carry you and a handful of survivors back to your empire. You will tell them what happened here. You will show them the recordings. You will make them understand that Earth is not to be touched. And if they do not listen, if they send more fleets, Interface 7's expression hardened. Then we will destroy those fleets as well, and the next, until your empire learns. We do not want war, Admiral. We want to be left alone. We want to live quiet lives on our quiet world and forget once again the terrible things we are capable of. But if you force us to remember, her eyes blazed with sudden, terrible light, we will remember everything. The communication ended, and the final phase began. For the next 3 days, the humans systematically dismantled what remained of the 4th Expeditionary Fleet. They were efficient and, in their own way, merciful. Ships that surrendered were spared, their crews taken prisoner. Only those that continued to fight were destroyed. Vorath watched it all from his crippled flagship. He watched his officers die. He watched his ships burn. He watched the pride of the Valdori Dominion reduced to scrap metal and floating corpses. And he understood, finally, what the Morkethi ambassador had tried to tell him. Earth was not a cradle. It was not a prison. It was not even a fortress. It was a cage, built by a species that had looked at its own power and been terrified by what it saw. A cage designed to contain something too dangerous to be let loose in the universe. A cage that had held for millions of years, until he had come along and opened the door. On the 6th day, when only his flagship and a handful of escorts remained, the humans transmitted their final message. It was Admiral Chen again, looking older than she had a week ago. The weight of what she had done was visible in her eyes. The ship Messenger of Sorrow has been designated as your survivor vessel, she said. You and 300 of your crew will be transferred to it within the hour. The ship's weapons have been removed, but its engines are functional. You will have enough supplies to reach Dominion space." "What about the other survivors?" Vorath asked. "The crews of the ships that surrendered?" "They will remain here as guests. They will not be harmed. They will be returned when we are confident that your empire has received and accepted our message." "And if we come back? If the High Sovereign sends more fleets?" Admiral Chen was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was heavy with exhaustion. "Do you know why we let you live, Admiral? It is not kindness. It is not mercy. It is because we need someone to deliver the warning. Someone who has seen what we can do with our defenses barely woken. Someone who can make your leaders understand that this," she gestured at the devastation around them, "was restraint." "Restraint? We used perhaps 2% of our available systems. The rest remain dormant. If your empire forces us to wake them—" She shook her head. "Please, Admiral, make them listen. Make them understand. We do not want to remember what we truly are. But we will if we must. And if we do, your empire will not be the only thing that burns." The transmission ended. 1 hour later, Vorath stood on the bridge of the Messenger of Sorrow, watching his former flagship explode in the distance. The Eternal Dominion, pride of the Valdori fleet, died in silence, its hull collapsing inward under forces that defied physics. Around him, the 300 surviving crew members sat in stunned silence. They had witnessed the destruction of everything they believed in. Their certainty, their arrogance, their faith in Dominion supremacy, all of it had been burned away in 6 days of unimaginable horror. The ship's engines powered up, and the Messenger of Sorrow began its long journey home. Behind them, Earth hung blue and peaceful in the void, looking exactly as it had when they arrived. A small, harmless world. A trap that had closed around them before they even knew it existed. A sleeping giant that was awake now, watching the stars with ancient, terrible eyes. Vorath did not look back. He could not bear to see it. He had a message to deliver. And he would make sure the galaxy heard it, no matter what it cost him. The humans were not prey. They had never been prey. And anyone who forgot that lesson would learn it the same way he had, in fire and silence and the cold mathematics of extinction. The journey back to Valdor Prime took 47 days. 47 days of silence and darkness, of recycled air and rationed food, of 300 survivors haunted by memories they could not escape. High Admiral Vorath spent most of that time in his quarters, reviewing the recordings. He watched them over and over again, searching for something he might have missed, some weakness in the human defenses that could be exploited. He found nothing. The more he watched, the more he understood how completely they had been outmatched. The other survivors dealt with the trauma in their own ways. Some stopped eating and had to be force-fed by the ship's medical staff. Others became violent, lashing out at anyone who came near them. A few simply gave up, retreating into catatonic states from which they could not be roused. Vorath understood their pain. He felt it himself, in the quiet hours when sleep would not come, and the images played endlessly in his mind. The dark ships rising from the asteroid belt, the platforms emerging from Earth's oceans, the way his fleet had died piece by piece, while he watched helplessly from a broken bridge. But he could not afford to break. He had a duty to perform. The humans had let him live for a reason, and that reason was to deliver a message. He would see it delivered, no matter what it cost him personally. On the 32nd day, long-range communications finally reconnected with Dominion networks. The first transmissions they received were frantic queries from Fleet Command, demanding to know what had happened to the 4th Expeditionary Fleet. The planned conquest of Earth had been expected to take 3 rotations. It had been over a month and no reports had come. Vorath composed his response carefully. He did not try to explain everything in a single message. He simply stated that the fleet had been destroyed, that he and 300 survivors were returning on a single ship, and that he carried information of critical importance for the High Sovereign himself. The response came within hours. All Dominion military assets were to rendezvous with the Messenger of Sorrow and escort it to Valdor Prime. The High Sovereign would be waiting personally to receive Vorath's report. When the escort fleet arrived, Vorath saw the fear in their captain's eyes. They looked at his battered ship and his hollow-eyed crew, and they understood that something terrible had happened. They asked questions, but Vorath refused to answer. The full story could only be told once, and it had to be told to the right audience. The Messenger of Sorrow entered the Valdor system on a gray morning when the capital world's sun was hidden behind thick clouds. The ship descended through the atmosphere and landed at the Imperial Palace, where a crowd of thousands had gathered to witness the return. Vorath emerged first. He was thinner than when he had left, his scales dull and his eyes sunken. He walked with the careful steps of someone who had forgotten what solid ground felt like. Behind him came his survivors, each one bearing the marks of their ordeal in their own way. The crowd watched in silence. No one cheered. No one asked questions. The absence of the fleet spoke louder than any words. High Sovereign Ketharan received Vorath in the throne room, surrounded by his council of advisors and military commanders. The room was vast and ancient, its walls covered with trophies from 12,000 years of conquest. The skulls of defeated enemies hung from the ceiling. The flags of destroyed civilizations lined the halls. Vorath walked the length of the chamber and knelt before the throne. He did not rise until the sovereign spoke. "Tell me," Ketharan said, his voice cold and controlled. "Tell me everything," Vorath told him. He started at the beginning, with the warnings from the Nithari and the crystalline mines and the Morkethi. He described the approach to Sul, the strange behavior of the humans, the surrender messages that had been designed to lure them deeper into the trap. He explained how the defenses had revealed themselves, rising from places no one had thought to look, wielding weapons that the Dominion had no answer to. He told them about Interface 7 and the terrible truth she had revealed, the ancient history of humanity, the empire they had built and then deliberately forgotten, the safeguards they had left to protect themselves from exactly this kind of invasion. He showed them the recordings. Every moment of the 6-day battle played out on holographic displays around the throne room. The council watched in silence as 2,000 warships were systematically destroyed by a species they had dismissed as primitive. When the final recording ended, the destruction of the Eternal Dominion, filmed from the Messenger of Sorrow as it fled the system, no one spoke for a very long time. Finally, Ketharan broke the silence. "You expect me to believe this? That humans are some kind of ancient, sleeping race that once ruled the galaxy? I believe it, my sovereign. I did not want to. I fought against accepting it until there was no other explanation. But the evidence is undeniable. Their technology is not more advanced than ours. It is different in a fundamental way. It does not follow the same principles. It comes from a tradition of science that we have never encountered, because it predates our civilization by millions of years. Even if this is true, they are still only one planet, one system. We have millions of ships. We can bury them in numbers alone." Vorath had expected this response. He had prepared for it during the long journey home. "My sovereign, they used 2% of their defensive systems against us. 2%. They told me this themselves, and I believe them. What we faced was nothing more than the outer layer of a trap designed to destroy anything that threatened their world. If we send more ships, they will use more of their defenses. And if we push them hard enough—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "They said they chose to forget what they were. They said they buried their knowledge and their power because they were afraid of what they had become. If we force them to remember, if we make them dig up the weapons they sealed away—" "What? What will happen? I do not know exactly, but I know that the Morkethi, who have watched galaxies rise and fall, were afraid of them. The crystalline minds, who have existed for billions of years, broke their silence to warn us. Every species that knows what Earth truly is has been telling us the same thing. Do not go there. Do not wake them. Leave them alone. The council erupted into argument. Some demanded immediate retaliation, the mobilization of the entire Dominion military to crush this unexpected threat. Others called for caution, for more investigation before any action was taken. Still others suggested that Vorath was a coward or a traitor, that his story was a fabrication designed to cover his own failures. Through it all, Ketharan sat in silence on his throne, watching the chaos with unreadable eyes. He had ruled for 300 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had made decisions that shaped the fate of billions. When he finally spoke, everyone fell silent immediately. I have heard enough. He rose from his throne and walked to the center of the room, where the holographic display still showed the Sol system. Earth rotated slowly in the projection, blue and green and innocent-looking. I did not become High Sovereign by ignoring warnings, he said, and I did not build this empire by fighting battles I could not win. Whatever the truth of humanity's history, one fact is clear. We cannot conquer them with our current capabilities. Sending more ships will only waste lives and resources. Then what do you propose, my sovereign? Asked one of his advisors. Ketharan was quiet for a moment, staring at the image of Earth. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with something that might have been resignation. We will redraw our borders. All territory within 50 light-years of the Sol system will be designated a forbidden zone. No Dominion ship, probe, or signal will enter that space. Any species that wishes to approach Earth will do so at their own risk, but they will receive no support from us. My sovereign, that means abandoning dozens of systems we have already claimed. I know what it means. Ketharan turned to face his council, and his eyes blazed with cold fire. Would you prefer that I send more fleets to die? Would you prefer that I poke the sleeping beast until it wakes fully and decides that our empire is a threat to be eliminated? I have seen the recordings. I have heard the warnings. I am choosing survival over pride. No one argued further. In the days that followed, the news spread throughout the Dominion and beyond. The greatest military force in the sector had been destroyed by a single planet. The 4th Expeditionary Fleet, 2,000 ships strong, had been erased by a species that had never left its home system. The recordings were copied and shared across 1,000 worlds. Every species in the galaxy watched the death of the Valdori fleet and drew their own conclusions. Some felt satisfaction at seeing the mighty Dominion humbled. Others felt fear, wondering what else the humans might be capable of. Still others felt a strange kind of hope, seeing proof that the strong could be defeated by the clever and the prepared. The Morkethi remained silent, as they always did, but observers noted that their attention had shifted. They no longer watched the Dominion with quite the same intensity. Their ancient eyes were focused now on a small blue world at the edge of the Orion Arm. The crystalline minds resumed their eternal silence, but not before sending one final message to every species capable of receiving it. It contained only 3 words. We remember now. The Nithari returned to the Sol system 6 months later, requesting permission to establish trading relations with Earth. The humans accepted, and within a year, Nithari merchants were the only non-human presence allowed within 50 light-years of the planet. What they saw there, they never shared with anyone else. And on Valdor Prime, High Admiral Vorath lived out the rest of his days in quiet retirement. He was not punished for his failure. The Sovereign recognized that no punishment could match what he had already suffered. Instead, he was given a small estate on a distant moon and left alone with his memories. He spent his final years writing. Not a military history or a tactical analysis, but something more personal. A warning, addressed to any future generation that might forget the lesson he had learned. The document was called The Earth Testimony, and it began with these words: I write this for those who will come after, who may look at the stars and wonder what threats lurk among them. I write this so that you will understand what I learned in the fire and darkness of the Sol system when everything I believed was proven wrong. Humanity is not our enemy. They do not want war. They do not want conquest. They want only to be left alone, to live their small lives on their small world and forget the terrible power that sleeps within them. But make no mistake, if you threaten them, they will remember. If you attack their world, they will wake. And if you force them to become again what they once were, no force in this galaxy will be able to stop them. I have seen what 2% of their defensive systems can do. I have watched the finest fleet in Dominion history reduced to debris in 6 days. I have spoken with beings who remember when humanity ruled the stars, and I have seen the fear in their ancient eyes. Leave Earth alone. Leave humanity in peace. Let them sleep, and let the galaxy forget that they ever existed. Because if they wake fully, if they remember everything they have buried, then gods help us all. The trap is set, the bait is always ready, and the jaws never truly close. They simply wait for the next fool to walk in. The document was sealed in the Imperial Archives, classified at the highest level, but copies leaked out over the centuries. It became required reading at military academies across the galaxy. Every species that encountered humanity for the first time was given a copy before they made any decisions about how to proceed. And on Earth, life continued as it always had. Humans were born, lived their lives, and died, never knowing the truth about their own past. The defenses slept again, hidden in places that no one thought to look. The ancient weapons remained buried, waiting for the next threat that would never come. Because the message had been delivered, the warning had been heard, and the galaxy had learned, at last, to let sleeping gods lie. Far out in space, beyond the Forbidden Zone, ships from 100 different species gathered at the border and looked toward the distant light of Sol. They came as pilgrims to a shrine, traders to a forbidden market, scholars to a mystery that would never be solved. They watched, and they waited, and they wondered what the humans dreamed about in their long, deliberate sleep. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Morkethi ambassador who had warned Vorath materialized briefly, looking at Earth with eyes that had seen the birth of galaxies. Sleep well, old ones, she whispered into the void. You have earned your rest, and when you finally wake again, truly wake, with all your memories restored, I hope we will still be here to see it. She faded away, leaving only starlight and silence. And Earth turned slowly in the darkness, peaceful and patient and waiting, always waiting, for the next chapter of a story that had begun before the stars were young.